Powered by the Montana Television Network. Montana This Morning continues on Montana's News Leader.
It was a record-breaking day of rain for the city of Phoenix, Arizona, and other parts of the country were slammed with tornadoes. I'm Laura Podesta. We'll show you the most dramatic images from the wild weather.
Vice President Mike Pence visits Bozeman. I'm Mallory Peoples with MTN News, and I'll have reaction from both sides, plus what he focused on.
6:31 on this Wednesday. Chilly and Missy O'Malley with you here. Matt has our local forecast. Weather's topping this half hour of news, though. Residents of the usually dry and arid Southwest still drying out after being slammed with an unusual wet weather yesterday.
And in the Midwest, a suspected tornado is being blamed for ripping into a nursing home. CBS's news correspondent Laura Podesta shows us those dramatic images.
In the suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona, 3 rescuers walked through fast-moving floodwater to reach a man standing stranded in the middle of a road that turned into a river. In the city, cars were abandoned after torrential downpours overwhelmed the city's drainage system. Buses and even fire trucks had a tough time getting through the murky red water.
I had a panic moment, just like the water was coming in the car, and like you just don't know what to do.
The wet weather comes from remnants of Hurricane Rosa, which meteorologists say broke an over 3-decade-old record for daily rainfall when it slammed Phoenix with nearly 2¼ inches of rain yesterday. Schools were closed and thousands lost power.
That's definitely one.
In other parts of the country, the concern was tornadoes. Miraculously, there were no injuries when the roof of this nursing home in northwest Pennsylvania was torn off. Overnight in New York State, tornado warnings were also in effect as heavy wind and torrential rain moved through, dropping as much as 2 to 4 inches in some areas. Laura Podesta, CBS News, New York.
The storm that hit Arizona is expected to move out by this afternoon and bring rain to Utah and Colorado.
You were talking earlier, Matt, you're saying actually that weather that's affecting the desert Southwest right now also kind of impacting us a little bit here in Northwest Montana.
Adding a little moisture to our atmosphere. We're not going to deal with what they were dealing with, but it is adding moisture to our atmosphere, and it's going to make things a little raw out here. We're going to see another little push of cooler air. Not so much this morning, not bad temperature-wise this morning, into the 40s, but we have had a couple of passing showers at times this morning. I expect to see a few drips and drops for the early morning hours by about 9 or so, 9, 10 o'clock. Most of this should be out of the region. Temperatures are going to struggle for the afternoon, and then we're turning on winter, at least winter-ish. We'll talk more about what that means coming up in a few minutes.
Winter-ish? I don't like the sound of that. Thank you, Matt. It's 6:33. The Vice President was the keynote speaker yesterday at a campaign rally for Matt Rosendale. MTN's Mallory Peoples was at the Gallatin County Fairgrounds and has our report.
This rally was held at the Gallatin County Fairgrounds, same place as when Trump Jr. came to visit last week. However, this time, with the guest of honor being the vice president, there was a noticeable difference in security. Pence took the stage after an hour-plus delay, but when he did, the crowd was enthusiastic. His focus was on supporting the president's policies and actions, specifically attributing it to low unemployment numbers. Additionally, he spoke highly of Republican Senate candidate Matt Rosendale and his stance on term limits.
I will not serve more than 2 terms.
Outside, protesters shared their opposition, lining up early in the day. Some held signs supporting Democrat incumbent John Tester, while others used the opportunity to oppose Supreme Court nominee Kavanaugh.
We're protesting against Kavanaugh and his focus on not supporting the ACA.
Back inside the event, contrasting views were shared.
Not always are the conservative voices heard as much as the other side. So we're trying to get out and make our voices heard too, so the conservative side can stay strong.
Vice President Pence and other speakers ended the event shaking hands and taking pictures with people in the audience. Once the event did get rolling, it took about an hour before it wrapped up, with the vice president moving on to his next destination. Reporting from the Gallatin County Fairgrounds, I'm Mallory Peoples with MTN News.
Also, that visit by Vice President Pence focusing more attention on the Rosendale-Tester Senate race as that campaign enters its final 35 days. But the Tester camp claims it's just another effort to draw attention away from Matt Rosendale's record.
No surprise that Matt Rosendale has had to bring in countless people from out of state to try and hide his record. He's got a record of voting against our veterans, voting against our public lands, and championing healthcare policies that are going to kick Montanans off their coverage and not cover you if you have a pre-existing condition. And so he's bringing in all sorts of folks to try and make this race not about his record.
Stepping out of politics for a moment, police in Butte say an arrest has been made in connection with a threatening email against an elementary school. Officers arrested a juvenile from Butte who's accused of sending a threatening email to Butte Central Elementary that forced the school's lockdown on Monday and a closure also on Tuesday. The juvenile faces charges of criminal incitement and disorderly conduct. The sheriff says school officials have been notified and there is no further threat to those students. And Butte Sheriff Ed Lester says his department will conduct an internal investigation into Monday's incident where a man was shot by a Butte police officer. Now, 2 Butte police officers shot a 38-year-old man who came to the door of his Maryland Avenue home early Monday morning armed with a rifle. Police say the man pointed the barrel towards the officers, and the 2 officers fired several rounds and struck the man once in the arm. The shooting victim is expected to survive. The state is investigating the incident, while Butte police will conduct an internal investigation to determine if the officers followed department policy.
There's a 5-person board that reviews the whole situation and then submits their findings to me as to whether or not there's any policy violation. So that'll be happening sometime over the next week. The officers will remain on administrative leave until that is completed.
Police have not released the names of the victim or the 2 officers involved in the shooting. The sheriff said that he expects charges will be issued against the man who was shot.
In Bozeman court news, a Bozeman man sentenced to 10 years in prison yesterday for threatening a district judge. Josiah Wright sentenced in Butte District Court to 5 years each on 2 stalking charges. 36-year-old accused of sending threatening statements to District Court Judge Ray Dayton in Powell County, as well as prison staff and mental health staff. Powell County Sheriff Scott Howard said Wright has been in his jail for almost a year, and his mental health issues have made him a very difficult inmate.
And I assure you, they will have to isolate this man, because he's a threat to others, he's a threat to himself. He can't make it on the streets, he can't make it in the prison world, he can't walk the yard, he can't go to the chow hall.
Now, the sheriff added that the court has no choice but to sentence Wright to prison because there is limited space in state facilities that treat the mentally ill. Also, some Montana conservation groups are protesting the way the state is handling consideration of rules for protecting grizzly bears along the northern Continental Divide. The group faults Fish, Wildlife and Parks for having a hidden agenda for bear hunts. Those complaints come after FWP wrapped up a series of 3 hearings analyzing grizzly populations on the northern Continental Divide ecosystem last week. Agency managers say they're developing plans to manage the grizzly populations in the eventuality that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service elects to remove the grizzlies from federal protection. But in a new letter protesting the hearings, leaders of groups like Wilderness Watch, Friends of the Bitterroot, and the Flathead Lolo Bitterroot Citizen Task Force complain FWP is promoting a sleeper provision that authorizes and requires sport hunting of grizzly bears. Protesters say the agency should have been more forthcoming about using hunting as a management option. Now, FWP leaders did say last week they aren't sure if delisting will continue in the wake of last month's ruling by a federal judge which blocked hunting near Yellowstone National Park.
And seniors at 150 Montana high schools will have the opportunity to send an application to any college in Montana free of charge until the end of the week. The week-long event is organized by Gear Up and the Office of Commissioner of Higher Education. This is the 6th year of Montana's College Application Week initiative, and its goal is to offer Montana high schoolers a chance to save some money while getting a better idea of what school they'd like to attend after high school. Now, in 2017, more than 3,500 applications were sent to Montana post-secondary education institutions. That is fantastic.
Awesome.
Great way to get it all out there.
Absolutely true.
It is time for a quick break. What is the latest on the denuclearization of North Korea? We check in on that story in just a moment.
But first, we're going to check in with Gail King to see what's coming up at 7 o'clock on CBS This Morning.
Good morning to you. Ahead on CBS This Morning, President Trump mocks Christine Blasey Ford while seemingly distancing himself from Judge Brett Kavanaugh. We'll look at the evidence Republicans say Ward's team is withholding as they rush toward a vote. And what is the real impact of video gaming on the brain and the body? We'll show you the first of its kind study as more colleges embrace esports as a way to help students pursue careers in coding and video game design. We'll see you 7 o'clock on the dot.